The parasha of this morning is known as Parashat Vayilach, and as you can see, it means it send, to send a messenger. Alright? So the parasha of this morning is Parashat Vayilach, to send, and I subtitle it A True Vision. The True Vision. Parashat Vayilach is the 8th of the Torah, which details Jacob's safe homecoming after 20 years in the house of Laban in Haran, to the land of Israel promised to him by Adonai through the merit of his fathers, Abraham and Isaac. It is to be far from an easy homecoming. He must contend with his brother Esau, who is marching towards him with 400 men. Deal with the rape of his daughter Dinah in Shechem. Bury his beloved wife Rahel, who died in childbirth at the age of 36 on the road to Bethlehem. And bury his white nurse Deborah. His mother Rivkah also died at this time at the age of 122, although her death is not recorded directly in the Torah. Jacob then returned to Bethel to fulfill his vow to Adonai, which he made before he sent out to Laban in Haran. Only then does Jacob finally reunite with his father Isaac in Hebron at the age of 100. Isaac at that age is 160 years old. The end of the parasha detailed the death of Isaac, although Isaac is not to die until much later at the age of 180, and concluded with a long passage detailing the generation of Esau. This is what is the summary of the entire parasha. Jacob was returning home with his family from Haran after many years of separation from his brother Esau. Jacob feared greatly, and it caused him pain. Genesis chapter 32, verse 8. It was Esau's plot to kill him that drove Jacob to Haran originally. So on his return, Jacob still feared for his life. That is Rashi. Rabbi Shlomo Yisaki writes that Jacob was not afraid of Esau. Rather, he feared his own sin. As an intensely spiritual and God-fearing man, Jacob had faith that God could save him from the hand of his brother Esau. Esau's might wasn't what he feared, and his own ability to defend himself and his family were of no concern to him. He would be responsible and prepare himself for any confrontation. Instead, Jacob took a spiritual accounting of his relationship with God to see whether the connection to the real source of his power, his safety, and his life was intact. What am I trying to tell us here? I'm trying to say that Jacob was not at all afraid of Esau. In the Torah, it seems so. As if because the Torah said, and Jacob was frightened. He was afraid because of the 400 men that were coming. But actually, it is not because of the 400 men alone that Jacob was afraid. No. Jacob was afraid of his own sin. There is a saying that a sinner run when no man pursue. Because you are guilty. Because you have iniquity in you, you are always afraid of everything. We were discussing yesterday at Erev Shabbat. When, let's say you did something wrong and you are going and you hit your leg on the stone or on the chair, you say, oh, maybe God is punishing me because of my sin. Oh, yeah, I know what happened. It's because I did something wrong. That is why I'm receiving the punishment now. It is because you are guilty in your heart. You know, the Jews, we the Jews, we do what? We buy guilt. We love to be guilty every time. Even though if you are not guilty, we will tell the people, give it to me, I'm guilty. I will buy your guilt, I will buy it upon myself. So it is always ingrained, it has been ingrained in us that every time we feel guilty for no reason. Even though he has prayed and God has forgiven him, because if we have to understand, if we go back to the previous parasha, we know that Jacob is or was a righteous man. Jacob was a pure, righteous man. It is not like we are trying to, make him righteous or clean. We can see from the text when his mom told him to go and deceive his father. Jacob said, I cannot do this. I cannot do this because this is contrary to the inner person of Jacob. It is, we're not talking about the flesh, the real Jacob, the soul of Jacob. This is contrary to the soul of Jacob. Jacob doesn't want to deceive his father. But his mama said, let your curse be upon me. Because Jacob was afraid that his father will curse him instead of blessing him. His mama said, listen, my son, do exactly what I told you. If your father curse you, let that curse be upon me. You see, the mother pushed him, even though it's contrary to what he wants to do. But his mother pushed him to do that which he doesn't want. And he did it. But we see, it happens, it was positive. But what of if it was negative? But we need to remember that God has already chosen Jacob before he was born. That is what we call predestination. Predestiny. When God has destined you for greatness. In the Messianic writing, Shaul was given an example. Can the pot tell the potter what to make of it? I am a potter. I can do whatever I want with the clay. I can make a clay into glory, and I can make a clay in just ordinarily. So that is what Shaul is giving an example. Who are we, oh man, to tell God who we should be? It is God that chooses. It is God that elects. It is God that says, okay, this one is for me. This one, I want this person to be this. It is God that decides before you were born. Though we human beings too, we have to make our own effort. We have to do that. I'm not saying because you say, okay, you know what, my destiny is not good, then I cannot do anything. That is what God said, and so let it be. No, you can change it. There is a story like that in the Torah. You can change it. If you know that your predestination is evil, you can go before God and begin to ask Him and beg Him and ask Him, change my destiny, and God will change it for you to a positive. That's what I'm trying to say. We need to understand that in the Torah, everything is completely balanced. If you think that, oh, you know what, my destiny is to be great and mighty, and you forsake God and you begin to do what is evil in the sight of God, then God will deal with you according to His way. So don't think because, oh, my destiny is good, then I can just continue to commit sin, then everything will be hunky-dory. That won't happen. So we need to understand that by us keeping the path, by us staying in the path, that is when our greatness can be achieved. So Jacob was not afraid of what Esau is bringing, but he is making an internal retrospective. His sin is the one that is pursuing after him. He's afraid of his sin. That, you know what, maybe God has not yet forgiven me. Even though I have prayed and I have cleansed myself and I have asked forgiveness from the hands of God. But now it is the time for Jacob to face his nemesis. It is time for Jacob to face his sin head on. He has been running. You remember we talked about that last week? He has been running away from his iniquity. He has been running away from his sin. He has been running away from what from that border, that wall that is separating him. He said, now it is time to take on the job head on. You cannot say, you know what, you commit a sin against your brother. He said, God, forgive me, and that is it. No. The Torah says you have to make teshuvah. You have to go to your brother and say, brother, please forgive me for what I have done. It's not just to ask God, God, forgive me, and that is it. And this is what Jacob is doing now. It is time to face Esau face to face. You did wrong, you seek forgiveness. You don't run away. He ran away, and now is the time for him to say, I am sorry for what I have done. really, really sorry. Facing life as reality, it is Jacob's faith in Adonai which ultimately carried him through, a faith emanating from Keter, a faith rooted in the highest level of the eighth sphere. And he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, because you struggle with an angel of God and with men, and you have prevailed. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 32, from verse 29. The world is divided into those who can see and those who cannot see. The first group includes many people who are physically blind, and the second group includes most people who are not. It is a remarkably deceptive matter. Every day, billions of people for thousands of years now have gone about their life based upon what their eyes have seen and their ears have heard. Consequently, they have gone to their grave, many after long life, having missed the point of life. Thus, many people never move on the path. Thus, many people never move on past their lowest level of soul, the Nefesh, even after many reincarnations. There is plenty of rectify on this level alone, but life with access to only the Nefesh is nothing compared to the life with access to a higher level of soul. As much as such people feel themselves, they are really just a fraction of the true self. What am I trying to say here? I said many people in the world that we live only base their life in what they can see. I said I group them into two different people. We have people that are not blind, and we have people that are blind, right? And we have people that were not able to live their life to the fullest. They only live their life on the base of Nefesh. They could not live their life above that. They only live their life on the animalistic part of human, not a higher level of soul. They only do, you know what, my job is to go out, come back, do my work, I get some, get a job, get my salary, feed my children, and that is it. But what about, you cater for all the things that is physical. What about the spiritual? What about your spiritual life? Do you even take account of it? Every year we take account of what? Of our service with the government, right? We pay tax at the end of the year. In April, in March to April, everybody's running around making tax. Oh, this is what I spend for the entire year. You make an account. But how many of us at least sit down in 1 year and say, let me make an account of my spiritual life? What have I achieved from this year, from the beginning of this year to the end of this year, spiritually? I'm not talking about physically. You might earn trillions of dollars, you might earn millions of dollars, you might earn billions of dollars. But how about the spiritual one? You have the physical bread, you can drink water, you live in the biggest mansion, but you are naked before God. Your spiritual life is thirsty and is hungry. You cannot live above, even after coming into this planet several times. They still refuse to live above the Nefesh. They still refuse to go into the higher realms of life. They base their life only on the lowest level. It is like the difference between Jacob and Israel. One person on very different levels. When the verse said that the angel of Esau could not overcome him, Kabbalah explained that the him was Israel, not Jacob, whom the angel could not defeat. From the account of the epic all-night wrestle, it sounds as if Jacob only became Israel because of his victory. And he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, because you struggle with an angel of God and with men, and you have prevailed. Bereshit chapter 32, verse 29. But from Kabbalah, it seems more as if he first became Israel, and that it was this that allowed Jacob to defeat the angel. The change of name after the fact, and then officially after the incident in Shechem, was only divine confirmation of the transformation. What I'm about to say here that the Torah speaks that as the angel could not overcome him, then the angel asked him, "What's your name?" He said, "My name is Jacob. I've been pursued by this name all my life. I've been running helter-skelter. I've been running away from my iniquity, from my sin. I've been running away from what has been pulling me down all my life. That is my guilt." And the Torah said, "Okay, you no longer be called Jacob, but your name shall be called Israel, because you struggle with the angel of the living God and with men, and you prevail." Because he struggled, the angel said, let me go. The dawn is at hand. I have to go back. I have to return. He said, "No, you are going nowhere except you bless me." So, whereas I said it is saying here that the angel, it's not that the angel cannot defeat him, Jacob, the physical Jacob, but what the angel could not defeat is the name Israel, the spiritual Jacob. He struggled and struggled. The angel could not prevail over him because he knew that this man was a righteous man. The man is a good man. He knew from the deepest part of his soul that yes, I did something wrong. I have to repay my iniquity. I have to make everything right. I have to make it. I did it wrong the first time, but this time I have to make amendment. Unlike the other people, unlike Esau, his brother. Jacob tried. He made a mistake, but he fixed it. Unlike his brother Esau, on the other hand, if we look at the account perfectly well, from another perspective, Esau was a good man, right? From another perspective, Esau did not steal. Esau did not deceive nobody. Esau did not steal nobody a blessing. Esau did not do anything bad. He was a good man, right? But Esau is a kind of a man that said, leave me alone. I don't care. This one is good. He doesn't even make an attempt to do anything good or bad. He just stay on his own. He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to do what to improve. Jacob at least made a movement. It was wrong, and he said, "Okay, I have to do what I have to make it right. This thing I did, I think it's not right. Let me make an amendment. Let me try." But Esau, on the other hand, never even tried anything. He just stay alone, just like that. So how can you improve? How can you do something that is good if you never even make a try? If you never even make an attempt to try to do something? So that is what the Torah is telling us here. Jacob made an attempt. He tried to do something better. He made a mistake, and he tried saying, "You know what? It is time for me to fix my mistake. I made a mistake, and I will fix it." So we can see that the personality that the angel could not defeat is the spiritual one, not the physical one. From the account, okay, when, how, and what happened to Jacob Abenu to cause him to leap to the next level called Israel from the level of Jacob? What made our father Jacob to leap to a higher level of soul, from the level of Nephesh, from the level of just ordinary soul to the higher level of soul? Let's see. Whatever it was, it seems to have been the same thing that transformed the Hashmonean in their time, inspiring them to go from passive conqueror mode to a proactive conqueror mode. It was this that led to their remarkable miraculous redemption. God said to Jacob, "For endangering yourself for a small container, I myself will repay your children with a small container to the Hashmonean." That is the Midrash Sedekah Derek. What I'm trying to say here is that what makes Jacob to leap from the level of Jacob to the level of Israel. This is because it seems as if it just is a small matter. No, it is not a small matter, but it's a very, very serious one. The man said, I have to take account of my life. It is not, I didn't depend upon my physical strength. As the Torah says, woe is the man that depends upon a man. Woe is the man that depends upon chariot and horses. But blessed is the man that depends upon God. You cannot say, okay, you know what, I have wealth, I have money, I have everything. I don't care. You know, I can buy my way. There may be a time that your money cannot buy you nothing. There will be a time where all your wealth, all the gold that you have in this world cannot buy you what you actually want. Maybe you are on the sick bed, but your money, you can say, oh, money can buy health. Yes, money can buy whatever you want, go to this best specialist hospital. But when the time of judgment comes, your money cannot buy it. He said, blessed is the man that put his hope in God, and woe is the man that put his hope in the physical, in his money or in horses and chariot. Jacob has to come to a point where he has to say, you know, all this that I have is nothing without him, blessed be he. It is God that gave me everything, and I have to make an account to see if I'm still in direct contact with him. It's my life, it's my way of life, it's my way of action. My thing, is it the same as the way he wants it to be? Am I living a godly life? Am I living that life that he expects me to live? Or am I just wandering, looking for physical wealth? And my spirituality, I don't care about that. We have to come to a point in our life where we have to take account of our spiritual life. It's not, I know the country that we have is a country of hustling and bustling. You have to go to work early in the morning and come back late in the night. Oh, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I have to go back and sleep. I work 12 hours or I work 8 hours. But how many hours do you even dedicate to your spiritual life? 0 hours. How many hours did you say, you know what, it's time for me to talk or to communicate with my Creator? 0 hours. I mean, I'm not even talking about, I'm not even, hours is too much. At least, how many minutes in a day do you dedicate to your life, to your spiritual life? I do my work, but I don't allow my physical work to overcome my spiritual life. I'm doing my work, but my soul is praising God. You can be doing your work and in your mind you are praising the Creator. But you can be doing your work and in your mind you are, blessing His name because He gives you life, He gives you strength, He gives you energy, He gives you health for you to be able to do your work. If God take away your health, can you go to work? No. You sit there at home or you are going to be in the hospital. But God gives you health, give you strength, He give you life, He give you air that you can breathe and be happy. So it is very important for us to take account of our spiritual life, just as the way our father Jacob did. If not for those small jars, Jacob could not have found himself alone with the stranger. If not for the all-night battle with the stranger, Jacob would not have become Israel at least at that time. So naturally, the small jar becomes the symbol of Jacob's historic transformation, and therefore naturally, a small jar also becomes the symbol of the Hasmonean victory as well. With a twist, though, then it was the content of the small jar, the oil, that took the center stage at the time of Hanukkah. What I'm trying to do was to align this message with the message of Hanukkah that is coming back very soon. In the Midrash, it was written that, and Jacob took all his family over the river, right? And they went on the other side, but Jacob forgot a jar, a small jar, and he returned back, and he came back to come and pick that jar, and that was where he met the man, and they began to wrestle, and they wrestled and wrestled, but could not overcome him. Why did Jacob risk his life because of a small tiny jar. The Midrash said in the jar was an oil, an eternal oil. When, if you remember last 2 weeks ago, that Jacob was going to Haran to meet his uncle. He said, the Torah said, and he took the stone of that place and he put his head. The Torah said, and when he woke up in the morning, according to the Midrash, as he took the stone apart, he found a jar of oil, a tiny jar of oil. I said, oh, and he took it and he mounted up the stone and he poured the oil to give glory to the Almighty God. That the vision that he saw was so marvelous. He can feel it in his bone. He can really touch it. You know that this is not just ordinary a dream. This is not just ordinary a trance. This is a vision. This is what it has been. This is wonderful. It feels different. It feels complete. Say, this is no other place than the gate of heaven. This is a special place. This place is different from all any part in the universe. This is no another place than the house of God. So it was that jar. The Midrash said that Jacob never left that jar. He took that jar to Haran and he brought it back, because as he poured the oil never finished. As he poured the oil come back again. He poured the oil come back again, miraculously. So he forgot that jar and he went back to go and get it, and he met the angel of God. And they fought and fought and fought and fought. And God said, because you risked your life because of this, I will do this unto you. And that is what we see in the time of the Hasmonean, in the time of the Maccabees. When the Maccabees defeated the Greek, and the temple was restored, and a small jar was found and was used a small jar of oil was found when they could not find any other oil to light the menorah in the temple. And the small jar that was found, that was pure oil, was used to light the menorah. And the Torah said, and that oil lasted for 8 days before they were able to do a new one. From where did Jacob get this jar? When he picked up the stone from under his head and returned them in the morning, he found a stone that had a jar of oil in it. And he used it to pour on the top of the stone, as I said. It's a vision thing. Somehow, olive oil is tied up with the idea of a vision. This is why Jacob needed the oil to anoint the monument he built, because of the vision he has had in the night before. The Torah said because Jacob needed this jar to anoint the monument that he has made, because he had the vision before. So he has to go back to go and get that jar, but he needed it. Is very important. For to him is something that is very important. This vision that God has shown him. This is not just ordinary a dream, or it's not just ordinary a fantasy of mine, but a vision that has to come to pass, that it is true. That means that Jacob traveled in time, and God revealed unto him what is to happen to his descendant and to that particular place, because it was on that place that we have the Temple Mount. That place that Jacob had his dream on Mount Moriah, that is where the Temple Mount is in Judea, in Jerusalem. According to the Midrash, once he saw the sign, let me read here. And Jacob woke up from his sleep, and he said, indeed, God is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was frightened, and he said, but how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Bereshit chapter 28, verse 16 and 17. Certainly, Jacob had known that the Temple Mount was a special place. The holiest place in the world is the reason why, after going all the way to Haran, he returned back there to pray. Nevertheless, his dream greatly enhanced his vision of just how holy the place was, of the level of godly revelation that was possible there. Perhaps he already knew that too, but had just experienced it for the first time. Yes, we may have a lot of what we may have seen a lot of things in our life, but I do have a personal experience. You must have heard a lot of things. Oh, this person said this. Oh, I heard of this. Oh, I saw of this. I saw this on the TV or this and that. Oh, you know what? I saw those Africans how they suffered. You know, but you don't know how they suffered. You have seen it on TV. TV is different than reality. When you go down there and you see it, or you say, oh, some of these Asians or some of these Indians, I see that, oh, they suffer a lot. They don't have clothes. They can't even no clean water. Look at them. They walk naked. You can be seeing it on your TV. They might be showing it. But if you go down there and see it in reality, that is an experience that will change your life forever. Because seeing something on TV is different from seeing it in the real life. So in this case, Jacob is having a very profound, special experience at this particular place. It's not a story that he had from his father, Abraham, Isaac. So you know what? This is what God is saying. God is a mighty God. God is a great God. God delivered me from the fire. Yes, God delivered, but I wasn't there. I didn't see it. Right? God delivered your grandfather from the fire of Nimrod. Oh, okay. That is, oh yeah. God delivered Abraham from the fire of Nimrod. Oh yeah. You know, your grandfather want to sacrifice me. You know, but God saved me. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. You can be hearing all those stories. To you, it's a story because you do not experience it. But when you experience it yourself, it becomes something tangible, something real, something you can relate to. It is, you can be hearing all kinds of stories, but if we don't have a personal experience, if we don't have a personal, contact with this, it won't work. We have to have a personal experience. We have to have a personal contact with our Creator for us to experience what the Holy One is talking about. So Jacob had this personal experience with these visions that he had seen on his way going and on his way returning. There are two sample locations. What? But for the two, but of two dimensions. The word here of pen-he in Hebrew, which is equal, the gematria is equal 85, adding 1 to the collect a form of gematria that hint to the spiritual or to the higher spiritual root of a concept. The gematria is 86. This is the numerical value of the word Elohim, the hidden reality of God that people often refer to as nature. The gematria of there, because why am I saying this? If you remember that Abraham took his son and his servant to go and do what for the Al-Qaeda. The Torah speaks that, and as he was going, he has walked for 3 days. He doesn't even know where the mountain is, but God said, "I'm going to reveal the place unto you." The Midrash said, and when the Shekinah stopped on top of the mountain, Abraham realized that is the mount. That is the place I have to go and offer up my son as a sacrifice. But he told his servant, stay here, and me and the lad will go over there to pray and return. So in Hebrew, he said to give us the more deeper spiritual understanding of this word. Why did Abraham say, stay here, and me and the lad will go there to sacrifice? He's saying many people are always here. Many people always stay here in the lowest level of soul, in the nefesh. They don't want to go over there in the higher level of soul. Abraham and Isaac was able to go to the next level, to the higher level where the Shekinah reside, on the higher level of existence. Not only here in the physical world, not only in the physical flesh, but in the spiritual being. They were able to enter into that high level of existence. Elohim is the reality of divine light that permits the level of creation that everyone sees. But Havaya is the reality of divine light that permits all the creation that few people ever merit to see. In other words, Elohim is like the body, the clay, or the vessel, while Havaya is the soul, the inner light that fills it. Elohim is just, okay, I'm okay the way I am. That is good, I serve God. I go to the temple. I go to the synagogue every Shabbat. I come and sit down and hear the Torah. I come and sit down to hear the rabbi. Or I come and meet my friends and associate myself with my friend. But at the end of the Shabbat, what did you gain? Or at the end of what you hear in the temple, in the synagogue, does it just go here and comes out here? Or do you go home and reflect upon it? Do you go home and act upon the word that you hear? That is the next level. The level is here. Okay, I hear everything. Go, that is good. Thank God. Hallelujah. I go home and return to my sin. I go home and return to my normal way of life. I go home and continue to do the way I was. So what is the difference? Why coming when there is no improvement? When you cannot improve, you are just like Esau. It doesn't improve. To him, it's okay. It has no need for any improvement. But my brother and my sisters, we have a lot to improve about in our life. We have a lot to improve about in our spiritual life, even though in our physical life. So you can't say, okay, you know what, I'm okay. I stay here like this, and that is okay. But being the doer of the word, we don't have to hear the word alone, but we have to be the doer of that word, the word of God. We have to act upon it and live our life and live according to what He wants us to do, and lead our children to live according to their word. The true light. And Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I saw an angel face to face, and my soul was saved. And the sun shone for him when he passed Penuel, and he was sleeping in his tide. Bereshit chapter 32, verse 31 and 32. And the sun shone for him to him interpret Rashi. It took a little bizarre that the sun shone for Jacob. If he would be saying about himself, we can attribute it to a certain degree of egocentricity. A child feels the moon is looking at him, and from his perspective, it seems to follow him. However, the Torah is reporting that the sun shone specifically for Jacob. What am I trying to say? It sounds very egocentricity, right? That, oh, it's because of me that the sun is shining, right? Oh, the child is looking at the moon. Papa, why is the moon looking at me every time? You know, I go here, I go there, the moon is following me. Why me? Right? It seems so. It got to him, he's looking at the moon, he said that the moon is following him everywhere that he goes. But let's see from the Torah perspective, what is the meaning of this? The Mishnah in Sanhedrin asks, why was the man created singular? All other creatures were formed in units of flocks and dings and goggles. But mankind was originally a single being. So the Mishnah is curious why that is so. Why was man not even a couple or a family? Why was he created singular? Right? All creation, according to the Torah, in the book of Bereshit, was created double, singular, right? We have the male and the female, the male and the female, the male and the female, in groups, in family, everything, right? But the man, and when it came to man, and Torah said, and God formed man from the dust of the earth, and the man was Adam. But Adam was one, single. It wasn't there was no. It wasn't. He didn't create him and the female instantly, right? It was one. So why did God create man one? Why not like the other animals in groups, or in double, or in a male and a female? So let's see. It's a question from the Midrash. The answer is stunning, because a person has an obligation to say the world was created for me. That doesn't mean that you are proud. that doesn't mean that you are egocentric. No. You can say, yes, the world is created for me. He can say the world is created for him. She can say the world is created for her. Yes. Let's see. That means that when Adam opened his eyes and saw the light running towards him at 186,000 miles per second, and he felt the green carpet beneath his feet, and the sweet smell of Garden of Eden fruit entering his olfactory gland, he could actually and factually declare that the whole entire universe is created for him. Subsequently, every person has an obligation to say the same thing. Yes, a definite requirement to make that statement as well. What about all the people? What about all the other people? Wasn't it created for them too? Yes, the world is created for everybody. And it is not a contradiction. Imagine putting a 6,000 piece of puzzle together. Each piece looks very similar to the other, but each was carved out as a perfectly designed nature. Just imagine a mosaic that has 6,000 puzzles in it. Imagine it. A puzzle, you know a puzzle, right? A different, you have to fix it. And in this 6,000 that represent the whole universe or the whole earth. And each puzzle is designed specially. One does not repeat another. Every puzzle is specially designed to fit into a particular hole or into that particular part that it was created for. That is the same thing that God is saying here. And if one puzzle is missing, if you look at the mosaic, you can ask your eyes to go directly to that one that is missing. You can say that yes, something is missing here. You can say, this does not fit here. That is what the Mishnah is saying. The Mishnah is saying, the world is all created for us. I can say that the world is created for me because I am uniquely designed. You are uniquely designed. Each and every one of us, we are all uniquely designed. We have a purpose. There is a reason why God has created us on this planet. And we have to fulfill that purpose. If you don't fulfill that purpose, then you don't fit into the design, into the mosaic. Something is missing. And when you look at the picture is not complete. You can say, oh, something is wrong with this mosaic. Something is wrong with this picture. Why is it not correct? Why is it not so? We must say that everybody else, including all the generations that precede me and the billions of co-inhabitants of this good earth, are mere actors, making comedy appearance in a reality play steered by me. At the same time, I am an actor in everyone else's morality play as well. As this is what the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot famously states. If I am not for me, then who will be for me? If I do not fulfill my role of being me in the way that I am supposed to develop and produce as me, then no one else can fill that spot for me. It is a unique role that I have been given with particular circumstances and rare qualifications to succeed. Each and every one of us, we are special. God created each and every one of us in a special way. So we are uniquely designed to fit that puzzle. We are that puzzle of life. That is why the world is created for us, for me, for you, for us to be able to fit into that particular puzzle that God has designed for each and every one of us. And God has given us a special quality, individually and collectively, to be able to fit into that puzzle that He has created us for. But how many of them are using their talent? How many people are using their God-given talent to fit into that puzzle that God has given? Yeshua gave a parable about that. That each and every one of us is being given a special role that we have to fulfill in this life. If you did not fulfill your role here, then when are you going to fulfill it? you're dreaming in heaven, will you even make it if you don't fulfill your role here first? Do you know that this world is a path to the world to come? If you don't fulfill your part here, which part are you going to go and fulfill there? So you have to fulfill your part in this world, in this physical world, before you can go and fulfill your part in the world to come. So that is what the Holy One is telling us. We have to understand the Torah as it is written. That the Torah is talking to me and to you. That we have to do what is right and do what is just in this world before we can make the world to come. The Mishnah continue with this. The Mishnah continue with this perhaps less well-known word. If I am only for me, then what am I? If I am only looking out for number one, and my having developed myself does not contradict to the others in the puzzle of life, then it's no longer an identity crisis, but rather a humanity crisis. What am I? If I said, okay, I am the most important person that is the most important in the puzzle, I don't care about the other people, then what am I doing? Who am I? We have to realize and understand that every part of the puzzle, it matters. I am not the only one that matters in this puzzle, because the puzzle from the side of God is what is holistic. It's not individualistic, but holistic. We all have to be able to unite, to work together as one. I can't just come up and separate myself and say I am the only one that matters, the rest does not matter. No, the rest matters, because without the rest, the puzzle cannot be complete. The mosaic cannot be complete. And without me, the puzzle cannot be complete. So we need one another. We have to put our hands on the deck to work together as one, as a creature of God, to make this world a better place to live. The Mishnah concludes, and if not now, then when? So, when is a person meant to declare the whole world was made for me? Anytime and at all time. It's important to remind ourselves so we know the weight of responsibility we bear for ourselves and for the world in general. So I'm saying that there is a responsibility. It's not just for us to sit down in the Garden of Eden, everything is good, I relax. No. The Torah said, and God made man in the garden, right? And God gave him the responsibility to do what? To be in charge of the garden. What's the meaning to be in charge? You have to take it as yourself. It is your own. You have to do what? You have to maintain it. Very important. I built a house. Okay, I just know it's good. I spent what? $1 million to build it. It's perfect. It's good. I live there. Continue living there years over years over. I don't maintain it. Before you know it, that house will crumble because you don't maintain it. So buying a car, as we said last week, is not the end of it, but maintaining of your car that will last you long. The maintaining of your house, the maintenance that you maintain your house every time, every day, every month. That painting, you have to repaint a little bit of things, you change it a little bit. That will make the house to look young and more look like brand new every day. But if you say, I build a house and that is it, or I have a garden, I don't take care of it, before you know it, the weed will grow and it's going to overcome all the whole thing. The same thing with our spiritual life. If you don't maintain your spiritual life, the weed will grow. And when the weed grow, they will overcome everything and you cannot do nothing. So it is very important for us to be able to maintain our life. Adam was created to maintain the garden. We have to maintain our spiritual life. We have to maintain ourselves. And for those that are watching on the internet, please understand this fact. Maintenance is very important. Building the house is not the most important. It's very important. But the most important is maintaining the house. If you don't want the house to crumble upon you, if you don't want your life to be override by weed, by the concern of the things of the world, because we are always being deceived by what we see, by what we hear, right? With the concern of the physical thing. We allow that to override our spiritual life. We have to come up, we have to stand up and say, it is time. My name was Jacob, but now it is time to be called Israel. It is time for us to wake up from our slumber. It is time for us to wake up from that sleepiness, that the world has been put into the state of coma. Let them sleep, and the evil people can be doing whatsoever they want. Let's put them all to sleep and put them in some high coma state. By the end, that will finish everything. Then we'll wake them up. But by that time, it will be too late. We have to stand up and take part in life. We have to take part in politics. We have to take part in things that are happening so that we can impact the laws. We can impact what is going on. We can't just sleep and say, okay, that does not concern me. No, it concerns us. It concerns you. It concerns me. It concerns each and every one of us. We have to stand up and take our rightful place and tell the people that are designing some dangerous law and tell them, no, it's enough. Enough is enough. We have to take the path of justice. We have to take the path of righteousness, the path of holiness. It's enough of making laws that doesn't make sense. So that is what the Torah is talking about. For us to live to the next level, to the higher level of existence, to the higher level of soul, of the level of Israel. No longer the level of Jacob, but the level of Israel. Shabbat Shalom.